Stop everything you're doing right now. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another motivational speech or self-help philosophy. This is the single most dangerous truth about human potential that every successful person knows, but no one talks about openly. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why most people live their entire lives completely backwards, chasing shadows, while the real treasure sits right in front of them, invisible. I need you to stay until the very end, because the final insight I'm going to share will completely shatter how you see success, happiness, and your own untapped power. This isn't hyperbole. This is the truth that changes everything. Hidden foundation. There's a Shaolin master named Shi Heng Yi who gave one of the most profound speeches ever recorded, and almost no one understood what he was really saying. While everyone was focused on his words about meditation and discipline, they missed the revolutionary framework that explains why some people seem to effortlessly attract wealth, love, and fulfillment, while others struggle their entire lives despite working harder. The truth is, we've been taught to approach life completely backwards. We've been conditioned to believe that success comes from external action, from grinding, from forcing outcomes, from manipulating circumstances. But what Shi Heng Yi revealed in that speech was the opposite. He showed us that real power comes from a place so subtle, so counterintuitive, that most people dismiss it as spiritual nonsense without ever understanding its practical applications. Think about this for a moment. Every person you admire, every individual who seems to have cracked the code of life, operates from a fundamentally different internal state than the majority. They're not necessarily smarter, more talented, or more privileged. They've simply learned to access a dimension of themselves that most people never even know exists. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation in the way it's commonly taught. This is about understanding the actual mechanics of human consciousness and how it shapes reality in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Shi Heng Yi wasn't just talking about ancient wisdom. He was describing a technology of consciousness that modern neuroscience is now proving to be more powerful than any external tool or strategy. Reverse psychology. Here's what's going to trigger most people. The reason you haven't achieved what you want isn't because you lack knowledge, skills, or opportunities. It's because you're operating from a contaminated state of consciousness that makes it literally impossible for you to recognize and act on the opportunities that are already surrounding you. Most people hear this and immediately get defensive. They want to argue about circumstances, about privilege, about systemic barriers. And yes, external factors matter. But what Shi Heng Yi was pointing to goes deeper than circumstances. He was talking about the fundamental operating system of human consciousness and how most of us are running corrupted software without even realizing it. Think about someone in your life who seems to effortlessly attract good things. They're not necessarily working harder than you. They're not necessarily more skilled than you, but there's something about their presence, their energy, their way of being in the world that creates opportunities and connections that others miss. This isn't luck. This isn't privilege. This is the result of operating from what Shi Heng Yi called the original state. The original state isn't some mystical concept. It's your natural state of consciousness before it gets layered over with conditioning, trauma, limiting beliefs, and societal programming. It's the state of awareness that exists when your mind isn't constantly generating noise, when your emotional system isn't constantly reactive, when your body isn't constantly tense with accumulated stress. From this original state, you perceive opportunities that are invisible to most people. You make decisions from clarity rather than fear or desperation. You attract circumstances and relationships that align with your authentic nature rather than your conditioned patterns. This is why some people seem to live charmed lives while others struggle despite their best efforts. Internal warfare. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most of us are so identified with our conditioned patterns that we mistake them for our true identity. We think our anxiety is who we are. We think our limiting beliefs are facts. We think our emotional reactivity is normal. We think the constant mental chatter is just how minds work. Shi Heng Yi was pointing to something radical. Most of what you think is you is actually just accumulated programming that has nothing to do with your actual nature. thoughts that keep you awake at night, the fears that hold you back, the beliefs that limit your possibilities, the emotional patterns that keep you stuck in cycles of suffering. None of this is actually you. This is the most liberating and terrifying truth in existence. Liberating because it means you're not broken, you're not flawed, you're not inherently limited. Terrifying because it means everything you've identified with as yourself might be an illusion. When you begin to see this clearly, when you start to distinguish between your conditioned patterns and your original nature, everything changes. Not gradually, not over time, immediately, because you're no longer acting from the contaminated programming that was creating your limitations. This is why traditional goal setting and motivation rarely create lasting change. They're trying to modify behavior from the same contaminated state of consciousness that created the problems in the first place. It's like trying to clean a window with a dirty cloth. You might move the dirt around, but you can't actually see clearly until you start with a clean tool. The people who seem to effortlessly achieve their goals aren't using different strategies. They're operating from a different state of consciousness. They're acting from the original state rather than from conditioned patterns. This is why their actions have different results, even when they appear to be doing the same things as everyone else. Shadow recognition. Most people are terrified to look at their own conditioning because they're afraid they'll discover they're fundamentally flawed. But the opposite is true. The more clearly you see your conditioning, the more you realize it's not actually you. It's just programming you picked up along the way, and programming can be changed. This is what Shi Heng Yi meant when he talked about becoming the observer of your own mind. Not to control your thoughts or emotions, but to recognize that you are not your thoughts and emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. And from that place of awareness, you have choice. Most people live their entire lives being controlled by unconscious patterns. They react to triggers without realizing they're being triggered. They make decisions based on fears they don't even recognize. They pursue goals that aren't actually aligned with their authentic nature because they're chasing what their conditioning tells them they should want. But when you step back into the observer position, when you recognize the difference between your original nature and your conditioned patterns, you gain access to genuine choice. Not the illusion of choice that comes from analyzing options with a conditioned mind, but the real choice that comes from acting from your authentic nature. This is where real power lives, not in the ability to force outcomes, but in the ability to act from such clarity and authenticity that right action becomes effortless. This is why some people seem to live in flow while others are constantly struggling upstream. Energy economics. Here's something that will change how you see everything. Your energy is your most valuable currency, and most people are unconsciously hemorrhaging it in ways that guarantee their failure. Every time you react emotionally to a trigger, you're spending energy. Every time you worry about the future or regret the past, you're spending energy. Every time you try to control outcomes you can't control, you're spending energy. Every time you maintain relationships or situations that drain you, you're spending energy. Most people are operating at an energy deficit without even realizing it. They wonder why they lack motivation, why they feel stuck, why they can't seem to make progress toward their goals. But they're trying to create from a depleted state, which is like trying to drive a car with an empty gas tank. Shi Heng Yi understood that before you can create anything meaningful in your external world, you have to learn to conserve and cultivate your internal energy. This isn't about being selfish or withdrawing from life. It's about recognizing where your energy is going and making conscious choices about how to invest it. When you stop unconsciously bleeding energy through emotional reactivity, mental obsession, and energetic entanglement with situations and people that drain you, something extraordinary happens. You suddenly have access to levels of vitality, clarity, and creative power that you didn't know existed. This is why people who seem to effortlessly achieve their goals often appear to have more hours in the day than everyone else. They're not managing time differently. They're managing energy differently. They're operating from a full tank instead of running on empty. Authentic power. Real power has nothing to do with control over external circumstances. Real power is the ability to remain centered, clear, and responsive regardless of what's happening around you. This is what Shi Heng Yi was demonstrating just by his presence. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove anything. He was simply being himself from a place of such authenticity that it commanded natural respect. Most people mistake force for power. They think power means being able to make things happen through effort, manipulation, or dominance. But this kind of force always creates resistance and eventually exhausts itself. True power is effortless because it's aligned with natural law rather than opposed to it. When you operate from your original nature, when you act from genuine authenticity rather than conditioned patterns, you tap into a kind of power that doesn't deplete you. Instead of forcing outcomes, you attract them. Instead of fighting against resistance, you flow around it. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to be someone you're not, you effortlessly become who you actually are. This is why some people seem magnetic, while others are constantly trying to get attention. Magnetism isn't something you do, it's something you are when you're being authentic. People are naturally drawn to genuineness because it's so rare in a world full of performance and pretense. Relationship revolution. Everything changes in your relationships when you stop operating from neediness, fear, and unconscious patterns. Most people enter relationships trying to get something: validation, security, completion, entertainment. But when you're operating from your original nature, you enter relationships with something to give rather than something to take. This completely transforms the dynamics. Instead of attracting people who are also operating from neediness and creating codependent patterns, you attract people who are also operating from fullness and create mutually empowering connections. Shi Heng Yi understood that the quality of your relationships is a direct reflection of your internal state. If you're constantly dealing with drama, conflict, and disappointment in your relationships, it's not because you're unlucky or everyone else is problematic. It's because you're unconsciously attracting and creating dynamics that match your internal conditioning. But when you clean up your internal state, when you stop projecting your unresolved issues onto others, when you stop trying to get people to complete you or validate you, your relationships become a source of joy rather than stress. You stop attracting people who trigger your wounds and start attracting people who celebrate your growth. This doesn't mean all your relationships will suddenly become perfect. It means you'll have the clarity to recognize which relationships are worth investing in and which ones are draining your energy without offering genuine connection or growth. Financial freedom. Money is energy, and most people have an unconscious relationship with money that guarantees financial struggle. They're afraid of not having enough, which creates a consciousness of scarcity that actually repels abundance. Or they're obsessed with accumulating wealth, which creates a consciousness of lack that never feels satisfied no matter how much they acquire. Shi Heng Yi understood that your relationship with money reflects your relationship with yourself. If you don't believe you're worthy of abundance, you'll unconsciously sabotage your financial success. If you believe money is evil or spiritual people shouldn't care about money, you'll create internal conflict that prevents you from receiving wealth. When you operate from your original nature, you have a natural relationship with abundance because you recognize that you are abundance. Not in some metaphysical way, but in the practical sense that your authentic nature is inherently creative, valuable, and generative. People who effortlessly attract wealth aren't necessarily more skilled at making money. They have a clear, unconflicted relationship with value exchange. They know their worth, they provide genuine value, and they receive abundance as a natural result of their authentic expression. This is why some people seem to make money easily, while others struggle despite working much harder. It's not about the strategies or techniques, it's about the consciousness from which you're operating. When you clear up your internal relationship with worth, value, and abundance, external wealth becomes a natural expression of your internal state. Health transformation. Your physical health is intimately connected to your mental and emotional state. Most people are unconsciously creating illness and fatigue through chronic stress, emotional suppression, and energetic depletion. They treat symptoms without addressing the root cause, which is why health problems often persist despite medical intervention. Shi Heng Yi understood that the body is a reflection of consciousness. When you're operating from stress, fear, and unconscious patterns, your body bears the burden. But when you operate from your original nature, when you're no longer constantly fighting internal battles, your body's natural healing mechanisms can function optimally. This doesn't mean you should ignore medical advice or that all illness is psychological. It means that your overall health and vitality are significantly influenced by your internal state. When you learn to conserve energy, manage stress, and operate from a place of inner peace, your physical health naturally improves. People who seem to have endless energy and rarely get sick aren't necessarily genetically superior. They've learned to live in harmony with their natural rhythms rather than constantly pushing against them. They've learned to nourish themselves on all levels rather than just addressing physical symptoms. Purpose discovery. Most people are confused about their purpose because they're looking for it with their conditioned mind. They think purpose is something you find outside yourself, some special mission or calling that will finally make you feel fulfilled. But Shi Heng Yi revealed something different. Your purpose isn't something you find, it's something you are. When you operate from your original nature, when you're being authentically yourself, you naturally contribute something unique and valuable to the world. You don't have to figure out what your purpose is. You just have to stop being what you're not. This is why some people seem to effortlessly find their calling while others spend decades searching. The people who are living their purpose aren't necessarily more talented or lucky. They've simply learned to distinguish between their authentic nature and their conditioned patterns, and they're expressing themselves from that authentic place. Your purpose emerges naturally when you stop trying to be what you think you should be and start being what you actually are. It's not about finding the perfect career or mission. It's about bringing your authentic nature to whatever you're doing. Decision making. Most people make decisions from fear, social conditioning, or unconscious patterns. They choose what they think they should choose rather than what actually aligns with their authentic nature. This is why so many people end up living lives that look successful on the outside but feel empty on the inside. Shi Heng Yi demonstrated a completely different way of making decisions. He wasn't trying to figure out the right choice with his analytical mind. He was sensing what aligned with his authentic nature and following that direction regardless of what others might think. When you operate from your original state, decision-making becomes much simpler. You're not trying to analyze every possible outcome or consider everyone else's opinions. You're simply sensing what feels authentic and following that direction. This doesn't mean being impulsive or ignoring practical considerations. It means trusting your deeper intelligence rather than being paralyzed by overthinking. It means making decisions from clarity rather than confusion, from fullness rather than neediness, from authenticity rather than conditioning. Time mastery. Most people have a dysfunctional relationship with time. They're either rushing toward the future or regretting the past, rarely present to the moment where life actually happens. This creates a constant sense of urgency and anxiety that prevents them from accessing their natural intelligence and creativity. Shi Heng Yi operated from a different relationship with time. He wasn't trying to get somewhere or achieve something in the future. He was fully present to what was happening right now, which paradoxically made him incredibly effective at creating results. When you're truly present, when you're not mentally somewhere else, you have access to levels of perception and intelligence that are impossible when you're scattered. You see opportunities that others miss. You make connections that others don't make. You respond to situations with a clarity that comes from being fully here rather than partially somewhere else. This is why some people seem to accomplish more in less time than others. They're not managing time more efficiently, they're more present to the time they have, which makes every moment more productive and fulfilling. Emotional intelligence. Most people are controlled by their emotions without even realizing it. They think their emotional reactions are justified responses to external circumstances, not recognizing that their emotions are largely determined by their internal conditioning. Shi Heng Yi demonstrated a different relationship with emotions. He wasn't suppressing them or being cold and detached. He was experiencing them fully while remaining centered and clear. He understood that emotions are information, not commands. When you develop this kind of emotional intelligence, when you can feel your emotions without being controlled by them, you gain access to incredible power. You can respond to situations from clarity rather than reactivity. You can make decisions from wisdom rather than impulse. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. It means developing the capacity to feel deeply while maintaining your center. It means using emotions as guidance rather than being enslaved by them. Social dynamics. Most people approach social interactions from neediness, trying to get approval, validation, or something else from others. This creates an energy of desperation that actually repels the very things they're trying to attract. Shi Heng Yi demonstrated a completely different approach to social dynamics. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or get anything from them. He was simply being himself from a place of such authenticity that others were naturally drawn to him. When you operate from your original nature in social situations, when you're not trying to be anyone other than who you actually are, you naturally command respect and attract genuine connections. You're not performing or pretending. You're simply being yourself, which is incredibly rare and therefore magnetic. This transforms every aspect of your social life. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to fit in or get people to like you, you attract people who appreciate you for who you actually are. Instead of dealing with superficial relationships, you create deep connections based on authenticity rather than mutual pretense. Creative expression. Most people suppress their natural creativity because they're afraid of judgment or failure. They think creativity is a talent that some people have and others don't, not recognizing that creativity is your natural state when you're not blocking it with fear and conditioning. Shi Heng Yi understood that creativity isn't something you do, it's something you are when you're being authentic, when you're operating from your original nature, when you're not censoring yourself or trying to be someone you're not. Creativity flows naturally. This applies to every area of life, not just artistic endeavors. When you approach problems from your authentic nature rather than conditioned patterns, you find solutions that others miss. When you approach challenges from creativity rather than force, you discover paths that weren't visible before. Your natural creativity is one of your most valuable assets, but most people keep it locked away because they're afraid of being different or making mistakes. When you give yourself permission to be creative, to express your authentic nature without censorship, you tap into a source of innovation and problem solving that can transform every area of your life. Fear, dissolution. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is simply conditioned programming that's trying to keep you safe in ways that are no longer relevant. Most people are controlled by fears that have nothing to do with actual present moment danger. Shi Heng Yi wasn't fearless in the sense of being reckless or unconscious. He was fearless in the sense of not being controlled by conditioning that masquerades as fear. He could distinguish between genuine intuitive warning and conditioned anxiety. When you develop this capacity, when you can feel fear without being controlled by it, you gain access to tremendous freedom. You can take actions that align with your authentic nature, even when your conditioning is screaming at you to stay safe and small.